Welcome to this week's Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield. We know the struggle bus has been here for this cattle market, and we're really going to talk about it. Boxes versus cattle prices, disparities in the formula sales that we're seeing, big resistance in the trade. What about the South? Are they selling too fast, and does that set the tone for us here in the North? A lot of things to look at. As you can see, Brad Kooima joins us. He is with Kooima and Varlick out of Sioux Center, Iowa. So let's start with the fact that we did see some decent early cash bids coming, but I'm sure that's not going to hold the rest of the week.
Probably unlikely, although I was mildly surprised that we were able to trade some cattle early this morning in the South to one particular packer, a packer that seems to be a little more, sensitive to maybe being a little more consistently involved in the cash market. But the 119 trade there actually spurred a little bit of a rally in the early part of our session today, especially on the front end of the market. Remember that Kansas, of course, traded cattle last week at 118, and I think that most thought that with this desire to just offload cattle because of the cost of gain, that we would be lucky to hold the market steady. So the 119, I think, gave us a bit of encouragement. It's probably why, Susan, we also saw the April cattle did close a little higher. There's only a day or two left on that one, of course. One other little item that I did hear, that there was some cattle bought in the South with days, they call that. My view is the South does very little that impresses me in terms of the way they sell cattle, but that is one thing that they do better than those of us in the North. If cattle are sold and not picked up within 10 days, they have to arrange for that at the time of the sale, or the packer starts to pay the feed bill after 10 days. The North, we sometimes, I think, make the mistake of giving away inventory. Sometimes we have no choice. But you have some packers, particularly one that will sit on cattle for a month. And so when you're throwing $7.50 corn at them in the bunk and giving them all the leverage, where they still go to sale barns and buy cattle every day while we sit around waiting for them to get off their duff and maybe try to buy some cattle and get them dead. We've got a situation that there's plenty of things that need fixing. And right now we're in a very bad spot. So a little better than we thought to start the week out. Let's see if we can pull off a miracle and finish the week better. I doubt it. I think we're just going to be kind of those, sloping, sinking fastballs, I'm afraid.
In some ways, though, when the South sells so quickly, does that set the tone for what we might see here in the North?
Yes, and so much of that stuff is, there's such a small, limited amount of negotiated trade that goes on there in the first place. But yes, that does seem to, and don't forget, there's a lot more cattle down there too. Mm-hmm. So I think that setting the tone, it breaks the will of the futures market. It undermines the courage of the feedlot in the North. And it just, it's like dominoes. It just starts the process. Typically cash trade doesn't really happen around here till Thursday or Friday, most usually Friday. Fed Cattle Exchange had a few cattle that brought 119. Some cattle brought less than that. There's a few people down there that are trying to do some negotiating, but an awful lot of the formula stuff, you get into a market environment like this too. And if you have a formula deal, what are you going to do? You're just going to turn in cattle, right? Because you've got your deal with the packer, and if you're a negotiated trade guy, you're screwed because you can't get a spot. And the formula trade last week was I am so disgusted with what's going on. I can already talk about this with you, Susan. That I've reached a point where I've fought for this battle for a long time. I'm to the point where I'm at my boiling point, I guess, and your viewers don't need to see that. So I'm frustrated. I hope that there's change coming. I think that there's enough frustration within the industry that if there isn't change now, there's not going to be. But I still remain optimistic that there's some things that can be done.
Well, there's been some disparities between the boxes and what we've seen in the cattle prices. It's not just this week. It was last week, the week before that.
Correct. And it's at a level now that's actually wider than it was a year ago, believe it or not. And we had COVID then, by the way, and the packing plants, many of them are closed. So, yeah, I mean, a pretty viable reason, right? You can't get cattle dead. Well, we killed 121,000 of them yesterday. 121,000. There's no problem getting cattle dead. The problem is you've got a packer that's making $800 or $900 a day, and a producer that's probably losing $50 to $100 a head. I it seems to me we need to. How do we get some leverage that forces the packer to spend some of that excess profit he's getting? It starts with packer concentration. It starts with the lack of negotiated trade, too much captive supply. To me, that's where we got to work out the back end of this thing with the captive supply. But the margins are ridiculous. Boxes are $292 and they're buying cattle at $190. I mean, are you kidding me? And the disparity between what some of these guys with formulas are getting compared to what the negotiated price is beyond words. The high end of some of these formula deals are as high last week. There it is. As high last week as $240 in the meat. That's equivalent of $150 cattle compared to $1.19 today. Okay. I mean, it's, I'm sorry, I'm in a poor mood. Hopefully we can do something about this. We got a great industry. I wouldn't want to raise my kids any other way, but we got to make sure it's still around when they're my age.
I was going to ask as we get ready to wrap up cattle call, your frustration, because you're a cattle producer, the frustration that you see is frustration that I think so many in this cattle industry are seeing. Where do we go from here? How do we get this disparity fixed, or do we not?
If we don't affect change now, Susan, I don't think we ever will. And then we will turn into the broiler industry and the hog industry, and instead of having these independent father-son people that I do business with out here in Northwest Iowa raising 2,000, 2,500 cattle, they'll be working for some corporate outfit. I don't think that's what the people that I associate with, that's not what they want. I don't think our small communities want that. I would love to think that voluntarily this industry could make steps toward fixing that, but the commercial side of this industry is not stepping up like they need to. The packer also needs to participate. It takes a buyer and a seller. Okay, people willing to sell, negotiate cattle, but people are willing to bid on. And we're talking about the big four. Okay, and until something like that happens, what's the next step? Regulation. That's the only other step, right? We'll see where this ball bounces here. I think, though, that the tension, the energy, and the electricity is at a very high pitch right now. I'd like to think we could do it on our own, but it looks to me like we need the Packers to pick up the pace here.
All right, sounds good. A great discussion. I appreciate your time today, Brad.
Yeah.
That's been a cattle call. Just a reminder, commodity futures and options do involve substantial risk of loss, and they're not suitable to all investors. That's the cattle call. I'm Susan Littlefield.